So as a lot of you already know, the Hyperion is arguably the current best weapon inside of Hypixel Skyblock. Its damage, mobility, ease of use, and many other perks is what places it above everything else, including the 3 other variants of the Necron's Blade. However, not many people, if any at all, actually use the other variants, so today I'm going to provide you with everything you need to know about the Necron Blade variants to see if the Hyperion is really the best choice. But before we get to testing, if you have any further questions, comments, or suggestions about this video, feel free to visit me when I'm live over on my Twitch. I stream every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The links are down in the description below. With that being said, let's get right into the video. Alrighty, so as you can see, today's video is going to be a little bit different and we're going to be talking about endgame gear once again. But more specifically, I want to talk about all of the variants of the Necron's Blade. I do have a Valkyrie here which I will be using in today's video. These are the enchants we'll be using. It does have the Wither Impact ability. It's recombobulated, and if you want to look at the stats, I'll leave them up on the screen. But I've been getting a lot of comments of people who really wanted me to compare all 4 of the variants, and I do actually have the materials to convert this Valkyrie into all of the other Necron Blade variants as well. This will make it into the Astrea, this will make it into the Scylla, and this will make it a Hyperion. But I did see the video that Speed Silver actually made on this topic, where he went out and he basically compared all 4 of the weapons just on the regular zombies in the crypts. And he basically provided a pretty average damage test, but I felt like he missed out a lot of really key points about every single weapon, and I figured I'd make my own video about it today so I could showcase all the stuff that I want to talk about here. So just to get things started here, I want to go over the basic stats of... Alright, Future Gab here. I've just finished editing the entire video and realized that it's a little over 20 minutes, so rather than covering the basic stats of each weapon in this segment, I'll just compare them whilst doing the damage test, so I'll just cut straight to that. But just before we get to the damage test on the crypticals, the way I'm going to structure this video goes as follows. If you would like to skip through and see my thoughts on all of the weapons separately, I will leave timestamps in the description of the video, and there should be little chapters on the scrubber bar as well. But I'll start off with the Valkyrie to begin with, then I will cover the Scylla's damage, then the Astrea, and then the Hyperion, and then at the very end of the video I will talk about all these weapons as one and really get down to which one you should get, and overall why some variants aren't used as others, and the reasoning behind the Hyperion being the more desired choice. So like I said, starting off with the Valkyrie for these damage tests, these are the enchants up on the screen. It's got Fuming Hot Potato Books, it's also got 4 stars, but that doesn't really matter. We're not going to be doing dungeon tests for this video. The Withered Reforge grants plus 200 strength because I am Catacombs 30, and it is also a recombobulated sword if that helps you at all. I will also be using 3/4 Necron and a Tarantula helmet for these damage tests with the Ancient Reforge or recombobulated pieces. As for my talismans, I have 7 legendary, 11 epic, 21 rare, 11 uncommon, 11 common, all of them are mostly shaded or forceful. I am combat 43, foraging 31, and like I said before, catacombs 30. And as per usual, I will not be using any pets in today's video just to give you some more raw damage numbers, and that way the pet items that I have on some of my pets don't actually affect this at all. So to get things started here, I'm going to go ahead and get some basic numbers on these crypticals. So going ahead and hitting this one, we do about 243,000 damage in one hit, 243,000 damage once again, 243,000 damage on that one, 298,000 on that 4th one, and then 243,000 damage once again on the final hit. So right off the bat, setting a very good example with this weapon here, 243,000 damage a hit is pretty nice, and the damage of this weapon is very good. Now, just before I go ahead and convert this Valkyrie into the Scylla, I just want to talk about a couple of things that do relate to the damage numbers you just saw. As you can see, the damage and strength of the Valkyrie is really good with the enchanted version. I have plus 330 damage and then plus 380 strength with the Withered Reforge, which is definitely very significant and it is quite handy. But it's also important to note that we do get plus 60 ferocity, as you can see. So if I was to use the Dirty Reforge in replacement of the Withered Reforge, I would sacrifice a lot of single target damage, but the DPS would be significantly higher than any of the other Necron Blade variants that I will cover later on. So there is one thing I do want to quickly mention before I go ahead and convert this weapon into the Scylla. So moving on from the Valkyrie now, if I go ahead, put this in the crafting menu and then make the Scylla instead, we keep the exact same enchants, the same hot potato books and everything that I've applied onto it. But as you can see, the damage goes to plus 320, plus 380, while with the Valkyrie, it's plus 330 and plus 380. So we do have 10 extra damage with the Valkyrie over the Scylla, but the Scylla does have plus 12 crit chance and plus 125 crit damage, which the Valkyrie does not actually have. So now that this weapon is in my possession, let's go ahead and get some hits on the crypticals once again. We're doing 257 damage a hit, 257,000 damage on that one, 257,000 damage again for the third hit, the same thing on the fourth hit right there, and then 257,000 damage on the final hit once again. So as you can see, even though the Scylla does have minus 10 damage in comparison to the Valkyrie, the extra crit damage and also the ability where we get plus 1 crit damage per Catacombs level instead of strength actually manages to pull through and do around 15,000 more damage than the Valkyrie does, which is very interesting considering that this weapon is a lot cheaper than the Valkyrie. But like I said before, the conversion from the Valkyrie to the Scylla, we do miss out on half of the ferocity that the Valkyrie actually gave us. So if you're really looking for DPS and you want to have one of the strongest DPS builds in the game, then the Valkyrie is probably a better choice for you, as the Scylla is focused more on single target damage. But if you're looking to hit the heaviest and do the most amount of damage in one hit, this weapon is probably for you, and I will give my thoughts on this a little bit later in the video. So now that we have gone ahead and tested the damage of the Scylla, it's time to go ahead and convert this into the Astrea to show you guys what the damage numbers of this weapon will actually look like. So if we take a look at the basic stats with all the enchants applied to it, we do have the exact same damage and strength being plus 320, plus 380, but we do get only plus 60% crit damage with the Astraea, which the Scylla actually gives you plus 125%, and then the ability gives you more crit damage. But as you can see, the defense of this weapon is plus 240, which does change depending on your Catacombs level. So for me, it's going to be 240, but if you were Catacombs level 0, it would be 210. So now that I've crafted the Astrea, I'm going to go ahead and get some damage numbers on these Crypticals. So we're doing about 239,000 damage, 239,000 damage again, 239,000 damage on the third hit, same thing for the fourth hit, and then on the final hit, 239,000 damage once again. Now this was definitely expected, as we do lose a lot of damage when we did convert the Astrea from the Scylla and the Valkyrie. However, in return, we actually get a lot more defense, which can be very nice to have. And if you're using this weapon to clear through dungeons with the Wither Impact ability, which is the one that lets you teleport in front and do a lot of damage in a specific radius, then having this extra defense can really benefit you if you lack EHP or if you play the tank class. And I will talk about this a little bit later on in the video as to why this can be really useful, and also why it can be really useless as well. And just before I go ahead and convert this into the Hyperion, I do want to also point out that I still have plus 30 ferocity. So a DPS build isn't impossible with the Astrea. It is exactly the same as being able to do it with a Scylla, although you do end up getting more defense and not heavy hitting single target damage. But just like the rest of the weapons, we're going to go ahead and now craft the Astrea into the Hyperion. So as you can see, if we compare the basic damage numbers of these weapons, we do actually get an increase of damage from the Astrea to the Hyperion. It goes from plus 320 to plus 350. The strength does remain the same, but we actually get plus 60% crit damage, which is identical to the Astrea, although the Astrea gives us defense, while the Hyperion gives us a ridiculous amount of intelligence. So already, as you can see, now that I've freshly crafted this Hyperion, my mana is still going up right now as we speak. We do get a significantly higher amount of mana with this weapon, and it is of course suitable for mage. But let's go ahead and test the left click damage of the weapon, as that's what we're doing for these tests here. Going ahead and getting 250,000 damage, 252,000 damage, 252,000 damage again, 306,000 damage on that hit, and then 252,000 damage on the final hit once again. As shown in all the tests that I've just done with all 4 of the Necron Blade variants, the Hyperion actually isn't the worst one for left click damage, and I actually was expecting it to be a little bit less than the Astrea's damage. It does actually come with plus 30 extra damage over the Astrea does, which is really interesting considering that it is an intelligence focused weapon. And just like the other weapons that aren't the Valkyrie, it does give plus 30 ferocity. So if you really wanted to go with a weird ferocity mage build, you definitely could try it out. It's not a completely unrealistic option. So overall, I'm pretty impressed with how the performance of the Hyperion went in this left click test. Although as you guys would expect, this is not the strength of the Hyperion, and I will get to that right now. So now that we've gone through all the left click damage tests, I want to sort of cover the very important part of this video, which is why you should be using either one of these weapons, what they're good for, and especially why is the Hyperion the most desired one, and what could Hypixel do in order to make the other variants more viable when playing dungeons or really just around Skyblock in general. Now right off the bat, just because I have the Hyperion already crafted, I want to talk about why this weapon is so desired and the reason why people consider the Hyperion to be the best sword out of all the other variants, and what really makes the Hyperion that everybody uses today. So as a lot of you guys are aware, I'm sure that most of you know that Mage is completely unbalanced right now, and Mage has been one of the strongest classes in the game for a very long time. Now if you didn't already know, the current meta for Floor 7 quite literally is just 5 Hyperion mages, with the exception of 4 Hyperion mages and then 1 mage archer, but the mage archer uses a Hyperion either way, and it really isn't an archer focused build. Now because this is the case, people of course are going to be using the strongest mage sword in this situation, as the Hyperion gives you the most intelligence, it buffs your ability damage as a result of that, and when in dungeons this thing provides some really powerful stats, as you can see giving you 1.5 thousand intelligence, and everything else about it really isn't that important. So the reason why the Hyperion is considered the best weapon isn't because the other variants are necessarily bad, but it's because the meta is completely unbalanced and heavily focused on mage. So you may be asking, well, if mage is the meta and that is what everybody's focusing, then why wouldn't you make a Hyperion? That's obviously the best thing to do, as mage is the most powerful, mage is what's going to get you into dungeon parties, and it's overall what's going to give you the fastest runs possible and the most loot that you could possibly get. Now to that I say yes, the Hyperion is technically the best weapon because of this. However, I feel like it's important for you guys to consider the other weapons as well, because if you're not really a dungeons player, the Valkyrie and the Scylla are actually really good options and do provide a lot of really nice benefits for a lot of players. As I've said before, the Valkyrie does give you plus 60 ferocity and plus 60 intelligence, but the ferocity is the main kicker of this weapon. Having plus 60 ferocity but then plus 90 inside of damage, and then pairing this with the dirty reforge and then maining something like the tiger pet really gives you a very powerful DPS build, while the Scylla is more focused on single target damage and does have an option for more DPS but isn't as powerful as the Valkyrie. To put this into perspective a little bit better, the best analogy that I could come up for this is that the Valkyrie is more like the Liver Dagger, where the Liver Dagger gives you 100% attack speed and 100% crit chance, which does allow you to do a lot of damage per second, but isn't so focused on heavy hitting. While the Scylla is more like the Giant Sword, where you can optimize your Talisman Reforges to also give you 100% crit chance, but the damage of a weapon like a one-for-all Giant Sword is significantly higher and overall hits heavier than a lot of weapons in this game. So if you're a player that does use weapons like a Valkyrie, where the DPS is really important to you, maybe you do a lot of Slayers, maybe you do a lot of Golems in the end, maybe this is a good Dragon's weapon even though the meta for Dragons is also a complete mess right now, this Valkyrie is actually a really solid choice. And the Scylla is also a really underrated option, and I feel like this one gets completely ignored all the time just because nobody really uses it. But after all the tests that I've done in today's video, when I do actually get my own version of the Necron's Blade, and by the way, this is a borrowed one, I am using this from a friend who let me use this for today's video, I'm actually starting to heavily consider using the Scylla because I actually kind of like having heavy hitting damage, and I've never really been a big fan of using ferocity. I don't really like the Tiger Pet as an actual pet. I'm more of a player who'd use an Ender Dragon or a Wither Skeleton, and I feel like this option is super underrated and sort of just pushed away by the community just because this Hyperion is so powerful and Mage as a whole is really unbalanced. Now this of course leaves the last variant of the Necron's Blade, and this is the Astrea. Now my thoughts on the Astrea are very interesting, and I feel like this weapon also has a really good potential, but once again is just ignored by the player base for whatever reason that may be. Now the Astrea currently is the highest defense granting weapon in the game, although this is only applicable if you are above Catacombs 41, and a lot of people haven't actually reached that point yet, so realistically speaking, the Withercloak Sword actually gives you the most defense for most players in the game, although the obvious difference of the Withercloak Sword is that this doesn't give you anywhere near the damage and strength that the Astrea does, because as you guys saw when I did convert this Hyperion into an Astrea, the damage and strength up there is significantly higher than that of a Withercloak Sword, and the Astrea also has the scrolls that you can use on it, which does really separate it from a weapon like the Withercloak Sword. Now because the Astrea gives you the most defense in the game, this does make it the optimal tank weapon and can really buff a tank class if you use a balance of EHP and HP, so you can probably get away with using a weapon such as the Astrea right here, but then you decide to use the Giant Reforge on your armor and then use a pet like the Blue Whale right here to give you a lot of normal health in conjunction with the defense of the Astrea and the defense buffs that the tank class actually gives you. Now this sounds all well and good and really does make the Astrea a viable weapon, but that would be if Mage wasn't so powerful. Because the Mage class is so unbalanced right now, there really isn't a reason to have a tank on a team at all. Nobody really ends up dying in the final stages of the Necron boss fight, and if people do, it's never going to be more than 3 deaths. And like I've said before, the meta at the moment is 5 Hyper Mages or 1 Archer and 4 Hype Mages, so realistically speaking, you aren't ever going to need that extra defense from the Astrea, so for the current meta of this game, there is really no use for the sword. So all in all, yes, the Hyperion is still technically the best weapon in the game, and I would highly suggest that most players go ahead and try to get their hands on this one, as like I've said, it is much more versatile and more desired in the community at the time of me making this video. But like I've said, it's not because that the other variants are bad, and hopefully you guys do recognize that with this video that I've made for you all. And the only way that these variants are going to get any use is if the mage meta does change in some way, and the classes overall become more balanced as a whole. And with that being said, hopefully you all did enjoy this video. If you did find it useful or informative in some way, please do leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I did spend a lot of coins trying to convert these weapons from all the other variants, so if you did, it would mean a lot to me. Now, if you also have any further questions or comments about these variants, or you want to see further damage testing, or you would like some extra insight on them, be sure to visit me when I'm live over on my Twitch streams. I stream every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we always have lots of open discussions over there. But with all that being said, hopefully you all did enjoy this video, and as always, take care and peace. I know I said guys, he said I'm actually insane.